Welcome to Meaningful Morning. I'd shared with all of you that my mother's mother, my Nani, she had passed away on March 30th. This is Bhagwan Rama's Jayanti. And so my mother has returned from Bharat, from India. And last night, we had my Nani's celebration of life. So lots of people from lots of places came to celebrate her life, her teachings, her contribution. My offering in this celebration was chanting Bhagavad Gita's chapter 2, verses 11 to 30. I chanted each in Sanskrit and then explained this in a very succinct way in English. Most are not students of Bhagavad Gita. As I was chanting and speaking, I felt confident. I felt confident that in so many other settings where someone has passed on, no one knows what it means to pass on. No one knows what to do next. But now I and you, we do have an authoritative reference of what to do when someone passes on. How to feel when someone passes on. When I was in high school, the greatest gift that I extracted from high school was confidence. I feel Meaningful Mornings is doing the same. For me, I hope for you also. Our community, our cooperators, our crew, they have gone through the entire Bhagavad Gita and isolated every one of Prince Arjuna's questions and identified every one of Shri Krishna's answers and put this together, not in a FAQ, but a PAQ, Prince Arjuna's questions. And I've encouraged all of you to use this. This will help you to relate to Bhagavad Gita, particularly chapter 13. I'm reviewing Prince Arjuna's questions from this chapter. In verse 0, Prince Arjuna asks, what is Prakriti? In our book, we have changed the language to be more relatable. What is matter? The answer comes in verse 19. Matter is experienced. All that you experience is matter. The second question is also in verse 0. What is Purusha? In English, spirit. This answer comes in verse 21. Experiencer. Not the experienced, but the experiencer. The third question, also in verse 0. What is Kshetra? In English, change. The answer comes in verse 6. Useless. Change is that which is useless in terms of completing you. Logically, that which is changing can't make you permanently complete. Question 4 is in verse 0 also. What is kshetrajna? In English, changeless. If change is useless, changeless is useful. That which is changeless can make us full. The fifth question is also in verse 0. What is jnana? In English, knowledge. The answer comes in verse 11. There's a series of verses, but we've only identified the most clear verse in verse 11, and the answer is purity. Purity. The more pure you are, you just get it. The less pure you are, you just don't get it. And the sixth question, also in verse 0, what is jnaya? That means what is to be known. In English, supreme. And the answer comes in verse 12. What we just completed yesterday. In English, being. What is that to be known? Being, and you can take this as a noun, as in the supreme being, or you can take this as a verb. What is to be known is we're not doing, but we are being. Chapter 13. Easy or hard to internalize? By the looks of your faces, I've received my answer. And that's why we have to use lots of resources to be able to relate to this. I'm coming back to verse 12. Neyam yattat pravakshami yajñatvamritam anadimat param brahma nasattanna saduchyate. Neyam yat. What is to be known? Tat pravakshami. I am now sharing. Yat jnatva, and if you know this, amritam ashnute, it is tasting immortality, tasting fearlessness. In a subjective science, that is Bhagavad Gita, Vedanta, knowing is equivalent to being. If you know the Supreme, you are the Supreme. That is not the case with objective sciences. I know physics, I don't become physics, even though I don't know physics, but you get my point. I don't become that. And I shared with you a reflection from Pujaswami Tejomayananda. The ignorant die repeatedly. And you can take this literally, that they die and they're born again, they die and they're born again. But more metaphysically, every time we experience fear, that is the death or the non-experience of our nature. Our nature is fearlessness. Whereas the knowledgeable, yat jnatva, the one who knows, they die once. And you can take this literally, that their body dies and is not born again. But metaphysically, their ego dies. I've been reflecting a lot on Ruth Ginsburg and now Dianne Feinstein. I hope I'm pronouncing those names correctly. That a perspective is that they stayed in power too long. And because of that, the politics around the Supreme Court, being a senator in California, was compromised. And I feel the more we know, about the nature of the body and the spirit, we let go more naturally of power, of identification. So the point I'm trying to share is all Congress people and senators and judges should study Bhagavad Gita. And what is that to be known? Anadi mat, that which has no beginning. Param, that which is beyond. This is Brahma, the infinite. It is neither sat nor asat. Uchate, those who know it to be like this. Now here are some reflections. What Sri Krishna is sharing with us. The infinite, or supreme, or being, these are all synonyms, has no references. References imply relativity. Brahma, or infinity, is the locus. The locus doesn't need a reference needs a locus. Another word for locus is Atma, center. The center doesn't need a reference. The circumference needs a reference. What Pujya Swami Tejomayananda shared about this. He said, it is difficult to convince ourselves of that which is not conceptualized. You can't conceptualize infinity, the locus. So how can you convince yourself of this? And that's why, please, please, please connect the dots. Before Sri Krishna shares what is to be known, he shares what knowledge is. What was the answer to knowledge? What was the one English word for knowledge? Please share with me in the chat. I can see your mouths, correct. Purity. The more pure you are, you just get it. One more thought before we move to the next verse. This morning is morning 974 of Meaningful Mornings. For 974 days, I hope you're understanding and appreciating the effort being put in to train me and you to be more authentic and deep in a practical way, to not be results oriented. A result is a reference. And I've shared this in different ways, to give up results. The more you actually live by this, the more you will come to feel that infinity is your nature. Your nature is independent, is the locus, is the center. By giving up the reference or the result, this becomes more apparent, felt. See how much change is needed to actually feel Bhagavad Gita. Next. Sarvatah panipadam tat sarvatokshi shiro mukham sarvatah shrutimaloke sarvam avritya tishtati. Joy. Sarvataha means everywhere. What is everywhere? Pani, hands. Pada, feet. Akshi, eyes. Shira, heads. Mukha, mouths. Shutimat, ears. Everywhere there are these limbs. Loke, avritya tishtati. Brahma, the Supreme, that which is being, has pervaded all. Our limbs and our lokas, which means the fields in which these limbs operate, function, find relevance. The implication of this verse: what is to be known? Oneness. This is a poetic way, a way to encourage us to reflect on what is my ear. My ear is a reference. If this is a reference, this needs a locus. The locus is Brahma, Supreme Being. But not just my ear, all ears. Not just a sound like a bird, but all sound. We have only experienced oneness. And when you know that, you smile. And when you don't know that, you cry. Final thought. In our Upanishad, there's a beautiful phrase: Vacha Rambanam Vikaro Namadheyam, which means all of the divisions that we speak of, chair, porch, blue, dumb, smart, etc., these are just names. These are names that we have assigned to changes, but in reality, there's only oneness. We get lost in this game of names. There's a Game of Thrones, that's a show. Then there's a game of names, that's reality. Reflect. You have to reflect on this for this to be felt. An inspiration to application. Your application yesterday. Are you grateful or ungrateful? If I were to have this dialogue with Bhagwan before he leaves, I hope, he would assign that I am grateful. What factor did I use to determine this? That I'm never tired of knowing more about him. I love studying the Bhagavad Gita. I love studying Bhagavata. Yesterday morning, I was telling Sheila, finally, when one of our kids came downstairs, I told her I forgot we had kids. I was just studying and loving what I was studying that I forgot. Now someone's going to call some sort of service that I'm this type of parent. But I'm not looking after my kids. The original parent is. Your application for this morning. Our relationship, the foundation for this, is Puja Swami Chinmayananda. If he were not present in our lives, we wouldn't have a relationship, correct? So tomorrow we will have a special meaningful mornings to celebrate his life and teaching. So prep for this celebration by bringing an icon of your trust triangle. Bring an icon of your trust triangle to meaningful mornings tomorrow. Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Be safe, be sound, be serene, be joy.